That's some big power that we have granted these religious entities, these mega Walmart churches. And they really act like mega Walmarts in so many ways. Here's another one that I think a lot of citizens aren't aware of. And this is one where the federal politicians passed a statute to give extra religious freedom, but made it such that, here's an example, in Boulder County, Colorado, they passed a comprehensive land use zoning law in Boulder County, Colorado. And it applied to your private free enterprise businesses. They had to obey this land use law. But the big fundamentalist megabox church, they said, no, we're pointing to this federal statute. We're exempt from your land use zoning laws. Sorry. And they were successful. They were successful in court, so they can ignore the land use laws that everybody else has to obey. That's how powerful these groups have become. And that is a significant change. And that is why it is so necessary that secular coalition exists. We represent our 10-member organizations, including American Atheists, which it is so important that you support. But it is so necessary that we are there in Washington, D.C., speaking out about these issues, because frankly, we haven't done enough. We've only existed for a little while, and we need to do a lot more. We're in a world where good people haven't done enough. And I'm talking about all good people. They're good religious people. They're good religious people, but they haven't spoken out about separation of church and state. And there's a lot of good folks among us non-believers who haven't spoke out enough about these issues. And that's been a big problem, and we've got to help change that. And the other big problem is that politicians have been afraid to think and speak independently. And that's what I want to do for a moment now, is sort of do what Einstein would call a mind experiment with you a bit, and pretend that we in this room are political consultants here today, and we're going to advise our client who's running for office. And let's say the gentleman back in there, he's going to be our candidate. He's running for public office. He's a good-looking candidate. He'll be great. Yeah, I don't know if you want to give he'll give a speech later, but he's coming into us. He's asking our help. He's saying, I want to run for office today. Now, what's the first thing we do as political consultants to help our candidate over here? Well, of course, we do opposition research on our own candidate. That's what you do. Because you want to vet out, what skeletons you got in the closet over there? What little things do we want to have come out so that we can deal with them in advance and know how to prepare for your campaign? So we've done our research on our candidate over there, and we came up with some quotes that are a little uncomfortable. From our candidate. Quote number 1, "The clergy dreads the advance of science as witches do the approach of daylight." I don't know why you said that. Quote number 2, "Religions are all alike, founded upon fables and mythologies." Wow, that's strong. Quote number 3, "Christianity is our particular superstition." So in the real world of politics today, what would we say to our client over here about his prospective candidacy for public office? Well, yeah, you'd help him out, and I'm glad you would, but I know what I'd say after 10 years in public office. I'd say, hang it up, kid, and that'll be $10,000 for our consulting fee. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Just leave the check with the receptionist on your way out. Sorry, candidate Thomas Jefferson. Sorry, maybe you could take up a career in accounting. So, Thomas Jefferson, from whom we heard those quotes. Thomas Jefferson, who many believe was the smartest person ever to be president of the United States. Thomas Jefferson, one of our greatest presidents. Thomas Jefferson, we would lose from public office today because the author of the Declaration of Independence dared to think independently. That's where we are. I mean, here it is, Thomas Jefferson, the guy, the guy in the powdered wig. He's too modern for us. He's too modern for American politics today. How did we get here? Well, one hint might be from this quote from the 1984 Republican Convention. Now, this was, before thousands at their convention hall at the 1984 Republican Convention, when the minister opened the convention with a prayer, and it was broadcast to millions on TV, and the minister said, and I quote, "There is no such thing as the separation of church and state. It is merely a figment of the imagination of infidels." Infidels being, I guess, Thomas Jefferson, who came up with the phrase separation of church and state. Now consider this quote. In no instance have the churches been guardians of the liberties of the people. James Madison, the father of the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson, he said separation of church and state. James Madison said total separation of church and state. You know, Thomas Jefferson, I'm sort of a Madison fan because Thomas Jefferson, he was tall, right, and kind of good looking, played an instrument. The women really dug the guy, right? James Madison, short, kind of fat. I think he doesn't get enough of the good press. James Madison was really strong. And just to give you some examples, I'm lobbying today, here it is, in this 21st century, I'm lobbying today about some of these issues. I mean, we were pleased this spring when President Obama made less of a big deal of the National Prayer Day than did his predecessor. James Madison opposed the existence of National Days of Prayer. He said it didn't seem in keeping with the Constitution that he wrote, that he didn't think it would work too well with it. Secular Coalition for America, we lobby today in the 21st century to oppose proselytizing by military chaplains. James Madison opposed the existence of chaplains. He didn't want to have chaplains to bring in the Congress. Nothing is it. He felt it violated the spirit of the Constitution that he wrote. Secular Coalition for America is lobbying now against funding money from your tax dollars for faith-based initiatives. James Madison said that when there was no federal money, not a penny of federal money involved, he didn't want to give over any legal agency in carrying into effect a public or civil duty to a religious organization, because even when there was no money involved, he felt that that would be too much of an entanglement between church and state. That was James Madison. Now, I was on talk radio in Iowa where somebody called in, you know, one of these right-wing stations, and he said, yeah, well, Madison, Jefferson, those are just two guys. Okay. Fair enough. All right, point taken. So, all right, let's think about this. Let's go to Adams, because Adams was probably the most Christian of our early presidents. And here's something from Adams. Adams said the United States was founded on the natural authority of the people alone, without a pretense of miracle or mystery, and that this was a great point gained for the rights of mankind. That was our most Christian of early presidents. And of course, he signed a treaty that was approved by his Secretary of State, approved unanimously by the Senate, that said the U.S. government is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Not in any sense. And by the way, that document was also approved by John Adams' predecessor in office, George Washington. So Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, these were 1700s thinkers and leaders of the Enlightenment. And sometimes that made them lightning rods. Perhaps an apt analogy, because Ben Franklin, remember from school, he invented the lightning rod. And of course, you know that the clergy on both sides of the Atlantic condemned him for this, because if you divert the lightning, it's not hitting the sinner. You're going against the will of God. I'm not making that up. That is true. You can read letters to the editor from that time condemning Ben Franklin for creating the lightning rod. But that was not a successful view. Our guys won. Our guys won those elections. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, they won. But things did begin to change in America, and there was a rise of what we would now call fundamentalism in the United States in the 1800s, and some of the more free-thinking politicians of the 1800s did not get the memo that they should, button their lip. One of them wrote, and I quote, "The Bible is not my book, nor Christianity my profession." Now, that's Abraham Lincoln, the savior of the Union, who never joined a church, and who, according to his best friend and law partner, died an unbeliever. Now, I don't know whether Abraham Lincoln believed in God or didn't, or whether people argue did Jefferson believe in God or didn't believe in God. That doesn't matter to me, and I'm not going to speak for them. But what I am going to say is that had these gentlemen been confronted with their own words and tried to run for public office in the United States today, I think they'd have trouble not only not getting elected to president, they'd have trouble getting elected to the United States Congress in America today. That's the challenge that we're facing, that we would lose these tremendously thoughtful and decent people because of the real form of political correctness in society today, which is that you can't say anything that questions religion. And we've got to get over that. And I think we need to turn also in our thinking in America to another leader, a leader in the arts, sort of what I think of as the Abe Lincoln of American letters, and that's Mark Twain, the author of what many think was the great American novel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And you know, the central conflict of that book was what, right? That Huck was willing to help his friend Jim the slave escape, despite the clear teachings of the church that Huck would burn in hell if he helped the slave. Well, Mark Twain was also very clear. He said, quote, "If there is a God, he is a malign thug." Mark Twain also said, "I cannot see how a man of any large degree of humorous perception can ever be religious." Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to agree with Mark Twain, but we have to say that Mark Twain should be included in the American tapestry, be included as a part of American society. And one of the people who felt most strongly in agreement with that was Jack Kennedy, who went to Mass every Sunday. I don't know, maybe he had a sin or two to worry about from Saturday night, but he always went to Mass. Jack was there. But Jack Kennedy said this. Jack Kennedy said, "America is where every man has the same right to attend or not attend the church of his choice." And Kennedy said, "No church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference." What a contrast. What a contrast are JFK's policies to what we see in America today, where federal money does go to religious schools, oftentimes going to religious schools where they are free from laws in the state that secular schools have to obey. And when I say free, I mean free. One example is the Golden Christian School in Ohio, where the curriculum consisted literally of watching videos. That was their curriculum. I know a lot of kids who want to participate in that school, but that was your tax money at work. That was your tax money involved in helping that. Just as, by the way, with the child care that I discussed earlier, that was also your tax money at work, Michigan tax money, because those religious child cares in Alabama get the federal low-income subsidy. So about a fifth of the money comes from federal tax dollars, your tax dollars here in Michigan going to those religious child cares that I described in Alabama. That's the situation we're in. And it's certainly against the principles that Jack Kennedy discussed about whether religious schools should be funded or not. Me, I think we can come up with a rule that religious schools should not receive any public funds. But I also believe that we should teach in public schools, absolutely teach the Bible in public schools, absolutely. Teach the Quran in public schools. I am all for it. We should also teach the Constitution of the United States of America. Which of these documents evolves? And which of these documents evoke viciousness and violence and vindictiveness? You know, we need to make America safe for the ideas of people like Twain and Einstein, and we need to make politics safe for the ideas of Madison and Jefferson. We need to follow two golden rules. First golden rule, do not to your neighbor what you would take ill from him. Now, you've heard that in a paraphrase from Jesus Christ, good for him. But that quote actually comes from Pittacus, 5 centuries before Christ. A second golden rule, the Constitution of the United States of America, particularly Article 6, Section 3, federal officials shall be bound to support the Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any public office or trust under these United States.